So yeah, now we'll get started with our speakers. The first speaker is Professor Jim Hendler. Is the Taylor World Professor of Computer and Cognitive Science and the head of the Computer Science Department. He's also a faculty affiliate of the Experimental Media Performing Arts Center. Serves as a director and trustee of the UK charity website. What's that?
I'm gonna have 3 years.
Well, since he's just alleviated me, I know that he's a fantastic scientist. So.
There, this is yours. So this was actually probably the hardest talk I've had to come up with in a long time, just because to become a professor I had to unlearn everything. And trying to pick one out of dozens and dozens of potential messages was hard. So I think this is a great event. I'm happy to be here. One of the things that I have unlearned is that you should never, so I've taken, public speaking courses, and they always tell you, whatever you do, never start with an apology. So since this is UnLearn, I'm going to start with an apology today, which is that I have to leave early, so I'm not going to be able to stay and see everybody's talk, so I'm not being rude. I have an off-campus meeting at 7:30, and I'll be able to see if I don't show up. So, getting to the meat of the issue. So the thing I think was, so many things that I've had to unlearn, but one of them was, in science, and even in pretty much any field, there's always something that's hot. And so the place you want to be, you think, is where something is hot, because that's where everyone is. And so it's kind of really comfortable to be there. And it turns out to be really useful for a lot of reasons. One of them is that methodologically, to get into something new, you got to figure it out. To do something that has been well established and things like that, you just use the same methodology they've been using for a long time. To look at, to have results to compare to. So if you're doing something new, you don't know where to go, right? Hey, look, I got 37. Is that good? Bad? How did everyone else do? So you end up having to sort of evaluate against yourself, which is always a problem when you send your papers in. And of course, that's the third one. Your friends who are all doing the stuff that everyone else does are getting their papers accepted. But so my argument is that it's hard to start the trend, not to follow it. But that what you have to unlearn is that it's worth taking the chance sometimes, or it's worth at least knowing that it's a choice. Right? So in other words, when your advisor says, I really want you to do something a certain way because everyone else does it that way, you should say, okay, but you should also think about, but does that really make sense? So I got a famous story of this, and it's particularly useful today. But so I was lucky enough to have worked with Tim Berners-Lee, and I asked him one time about, what was the hardest part about sort of making the web happen? He said it was realizing everyone else was wrong, right? Because everyone else said, when you click on a link, it's got to be there. He said, but my intuition told me that could never work, right? That anything that had symmetric links, we don't have to go into, I'll give you my lecture, but one of the things I've had to unlearn is don't make everything a lecture. But when everyone else wanted to make it, so when you clicked on a link, you'd always get the thing you were looking for. And he realized that you couldn't possibly make a scalable hypertext system when it had that feature. So he went to meeting after meeting where everyone told him he was wrong when he was presenting this thing we now call the World Wide Web, right? I mean, he really saw that the basic assumption of his field was wrong, that something they were trying to do was holding him back. Of course, you can't possibly do that in an incremental way. So one of the things you have to essentially unlearn is that when you're told this is how it is, you should always question that. When you're looking at something and saying everybody does it a certain way, that's a great place to start your own research by saying why. Does it make sense? Is there something going on there? So that's sort of my unlearned lesson today was, if you really want to be someone who gets known in your field, It's a very risky strategy, so be careful when you do it, but think hard about what you're doing. Don't just follow the herd. Good enough? Okay.